When we covered this year's Goodwood Festival of Speed, the one thing that stood out to Charlie and myself, apart from the very changeable weather of course, was the number of Chinese brands that were in attendance. Now MG were the featured mark and they were celebrating 100 years, and of course MG has been owned by the Chinese now for quite a number of years, and they were everywhere, as you'd expect. But it wasn't just them. BYD had a huge stand, and along with them they had brought their subsidiary along, Yangwang, as well. Honky, a manufacturer that isn't even sold in the UK, they were huge. They had a massive big stand, very plush, luxurious cars all over the place. Xpeng, another Chinese brand, they were in attendance there. But tucked away, down the side of the mall, just behind them, was a very small and unassuming stand. And on that was a car called the Omoda. And whilst their stand might have been small and unassuming, the company's intentions are anything but. Welcome to this week's road test review. Welcome to the new Omoda E5. And as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we start on this week's road test review of the new Omoda E5, it is of course the time where I would ask you to make sure that you're subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Once you've done that, make sure you then press the little bell button that's down below. Why do you do that, I hear you ask? Well, the reason you do that is because then you'll get notified when the next video is uploaded and it's gone live. Once you've watched it, if you enjoy it, give it a little thumbs up, and of course don't forget, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about the car's review, such as the beeping Omoda E5, and of course on the AutoEV channel as a whole. So who are Omoda? It's a good question, in fairness. Well, they're a new brand. They're part of a much larger brand called Chery, which is one of the Chinese state-owned manufacturers who have been around for quite a while now, 25 years. And they've tried before to break into the UK market without any success. So now what they've done is, rather than keep plodding away at the same old thing, they've decided to bring out new brands, Omoda and Jayco, and have another go at it. And there's going to be two versions of the car. There's going to be the combustion engine 5 and this, the E5, which obviously is the one we're interested in because that's the one that's electric. However, before we go any further, let's take a look at the main points of the new Omoda E5. So the new Omoda 5 and E5 are C-segment crossovers designed to compete with cars such as the Nissan Qashqai, Renault Scenic, MG ZS and BYD Atto 3. The E5 is fitted with a 61 kilowatt-hour battery that's capable of delivering a range of up to 257 miles according to the WLTP scale. It's powered by a single electric motor delivering 204 horsepower. And two trim levels are available at first, with pricing starting from just £33,000. So a brand with little or no heritage that's offering a car with a relatively high specification for a relatively low starting price, but in a market space that's bursting with good talent. A forgettable face, or a face you should consider? Well, of course, the only way we're going to find that out is by putting it through the actual road test that car buyers trust when it comes to choosing their next electric vehicle. It's the AutoEV one. Now there's two models. As I say, there's the Omoda 5, which has a combustion engine, and then of course there's this car, the E5, which is the electric variant of it, and they're different at the front. When you see the Omoda 5, it has a big grille across the front of it, and there was almost an element of Range Rover Velar when I first saw that car. I don't know why, but it just reminded me a little bit of the Velar at first glance. But of course with the EV one, you don't need that grille, it's gone, so it's all smoothed over. And the upshot of that is it looks a little bit generic and a little bit forgettable in my book. I mean, it's not a bad looking car, but it just doesn't grab you and sort of like draw you in and make you go, ooh, what's that I'm looking at? You get these sort of tick DRLs that run here, and then of course you get the big Omoda lettering across the black strip that runs across the face, and your main headlights are down here in this sort of like almost chevron shape. That reminds me a lot of the Kia Sportage. Does it you? So yeah, that's what that does remind me of a little bit there. As I say, it's not a bad looking car, it's just a bit generic and a bit forgettable, I think. Your charging flap is mounted here. This whole section lifts up. There's an interior release for it, so not dissimilar to how the MG ZS When it first came out, it had the charging flap behind the MG badge, and of course Honda's ENY1 has a very similar sort of situation. So you need to be careful you don't have any front end knocks, otherwise you can damage your charging flap. But it does make it nice and easy to pull into sort of like charging stations, because you just pull in nose forward, obviously. There's some nice airflow management just beneath these headlights here. There's a little vent there that takes the airflow around the side of the car, and obviously you've got some cooling down at the bottom there as well. It's not overburdened with tech in terms of forward-facing cameras and parking sensors and such like, but depending on the trim level you get, it will have. This is the lead-in comfort model. You go up to the oddly named Noble, which has a 360-degree parking camera, which this car doesn't get, which is a bit of a shame. So there's no sort of like cameras around the front of this one, just the parking sensors at the corners. But yeah, it's a bit generic and forgettable of face, I think. And the side profile's not much different. In fact, it really could be anything in this class you're looking at. Now, to give you an idea of that class, it's a C-segment SUV crossover. So, Nissan Qashqai. And the reason I mentioned Nissan Qashqai, because okay, you don't get the Nissan Qashqai as an electric car, but it is 1 millimeter shorter than a Qashqai. So if you have that size of car in your head, if you can imagine that Qashqai, that is the size of car that we're talking about here. Okay, you get 18-inch wheels standard on both cars. Same alloy wheels, that's the same. A little bit of an indented sort of like wheel arch there. It sort of like just dips in a little bit above the wheel itself. Ubiquitous black plastic cladding at the bottom. There's a bit of a tick. There's a little bit of sort of like carbon fibre trim, if you like, I think, there just along the mirrors and just down the bottom there as well. No privacy glass on this lead-in model. This section here is very Qashqai. In fact, if somebody had said to me that is sort of like a derivative of the Qashqai, or even a new Toyota, just by looking at this rear section here, you'd probably think they were right. But yeah, it's not exactly a standout car in the market sector. This isn't a window either. That's a little bit disappointing. This is a solid pillar here, but they've blackened it out to make you think it's all part of the glass house, but it's not, which isn't ideal for your over-shoulder visibility. But let's take a look at the back. One bit of the design I do like, however, is if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that I really like this, is that the doors wrap round underneath the sills. So as you're getting in and out of it, you've got a nice clean sill that's there. If you've got wearing light trousers or a floaty skirt and you're getting in and out of the car, you haven't got mud plaster along the sill that you're going to drag them across. So I do like that. And again, a little bit like the rest of the car, it could be anything we're looking at here. I mean, look at the lights. I mean, it's this ubiquitous sort of like tail lights that you get on the car that just wrap around the side. It is very Nissan-like, I think. There's quite a nice little sort of like bit going on here, this top spoiler. I quite like this. There's a nice little flick-up rear bit on the roof spoiler here with some airflow management, you know, that tucks in there. High-level brake line. You can just see a little bit on the roof line as well, where it directs the airflow down over the rear screen. And then you get this nice little sort of like stuck-on spoiler here just on the edge of the boot lid. And of course you get a rear wash wipe as you'd expect. Again, the big Omoda lettering across the back of it. You do get a reverse camera, even on the base model, but as I say, it's a 360-degree car on the upper trim level. You get your E5 badge there. Number plate seems set high, or is that just me? Just seems really high up, that number plate. But anyway, there we go. But it does mean the tailgate comes right down to bumper level, which is good. And of course you get parking sensors as you'd expect, reflectors, a little bit of a metallic-y grey finish at the bottom there, and of course this sort of like section of rear diffuser. As I say, it's not a bad looking car, and I don't want to be cruel about it, but it's just a bit generic. It could really be anything. As I say, if I told you this was a new MG or a new Toyota or a new Nissan, you probably would have believed me. So is it stand out enough considering it's a new brand, or is that what it's trying to do? It's trying to sort of like blend into a market space where people do like the more, dare I suggest, the less controversial looking cars and the more just plain and simple and get on with the job style of cars. What do you think? It doesn't really matter what I think. I've got my opinions. What's your opinions? As always, let us know down in the comment section. So, is it practical? It's not great, if I'm honest with you, because that is only 380 litres. Now, to give you an idea, a Renault Scenic E-Tech, which this car competes with, is 545 litres in the boot. The Kia EV3, a much smaller car, a B-segment SUV that's coming out, 460 litres. So, it's okay, but it's not exactly class leading, as you can tell. Also as well, I don't know if you noticed, no electric tailgate on the car. I mean, it's a first world problem, that, you know what I mean? It's hardly the worst thing in the world to have to open a tailgate yourself, but again, it's not overflowing with sort of like equipment and specification in that sense. The other thing is there's no underfloor storage, but you do get, believe it or not, a full-size spare wheel, which I haven't seen on a car for donkey's years. So that's probably not a bad thing. But yeah, there's no underfloor storage, but at least you can put the cables in the wheel well, because you do get that, I suppose. Now, there's a 60-40 split rear seat, which is standard, and if you put those down, then that'll take total capacity up to just over 1,000 litres. So yeah, as I say, it's not exactly anything to write home about. No sort of like nice little bits by sliding rear bench seats, or as I say, underfloor storage really, but you do get some chrome lashing hooks around about the boot floor, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, but there is a little bit of storage up front. So yeah, like I said, there's a tiny bit of storage at the front. It's not huge, it's not Tesla-like, but at least it is something. It's that little bit extra just in there that you could put a charging cable into, or you know, one of those sort of like granny chargers or something like folded up in there. So at least it's something. Right, rear space. Well, that's my driving position, and I'm 5'8", and it's okay. It's not outstanding. The floor feels pushed up. You've got a blade style battery, a bit like BYD do, the blade style of battery that's obviously sort of like underneath the car, but you do feel that your feet are being really pushed up if you sit with them like that. I mean, you can see that sort of angle there. So that's not the most comfortable position I would suggest that I would find myself in. But it's okay. I can just get my feet underneath the seat, and I like the seat low down, but I can feel the seat on top of my feet, if that makes sense. For kids, it's fine, absolutely fine for kids. Across the car, in terms of the floor, it's relatively flat. It's not completely flat, but it's so small a transmission tunnel there, you're not going to notice. So if you had 3 children across the back, or 2 with an adult in between them, or something like that, it would be doable, but it's not exactly hugely commodious. There's no panoramic sunroof in the car, so I don't have, you know, in this car, so I don't have that to worry about. So there's reasonable headroom. It's starting just to sort of like slope back just behind my head. If you were 6 foot, you'd be obviously a bit closer to that sort of, you know, I mean, that's the gap between me and the roof lining there. So, you know, that's another couple of inches. So, and I'm 5'8", so if you're 5'10", you're going to be against the roof lining on that. So there you go. Right, what do you have storage wise? You've got mat pockets in the backs of the front seats. There is connectivity in the back here. There's a USB-A and a USB-C charging port. As I say, the floor across is relatively flat. There is some shallow door bins, but there is door bins, you know, so I can't complain about that. You could pop some things into there. There is a fold-down armrest with 2 cup holders in, so certainly there is enough space for water bottles for children. And talking of children, when it comes to the ISOFIX points, they are really easy to get to, so they are just these lift-up plastic covers and get in. The only thing I will say, with it being sort of like slightly shorter this way, if you've got one of those bulkier seats that swings round, you might be a bit tight on that. So that's something to check at the dealership before you take the plunge. Just make sure you've got enough room to swing the seat round if that is the style of seat that you have. But it's okay. I mean, there are better cars in the class, without doubt. There are worse cars in the class. It sits very much somewhere in the middle. But it's nothing outstanding, is my point. And as I say, that floor being pushed up, as I say, does make it a little bit uncomfortable in terms of sort of like, you know, for adults to sit for longer journeys back here. But it's okay. Now, how's the interior of the car? Well, if you go for the E5 rather than the 5, so in other words, the electric car over the combustion engine car, very different style of dashboard. You get these twin 12.3-inch displays that are in sort of like one panel that sort of sits on top of a sort of curved shelf and curved round to more towards the driver in that sense. It's a really nice display actually. It's very clear, very easy to read. It does use that sort of white background that BYD are quite keen on, but and I am informed you can change the BYD one in fairness, but it flips to the dark screen obviously when you go, you know, at night time, so it's not constantly the white screen you get. And it is a tiny bit clearer, I have to say, so there's a bit more clarity in the actual screen of the car. That being said, it still isn't absolutely perfect. It's okay, it uses a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, so it's fairly quick to respond. You know, when you put, say, an address into the embedded navigation, it's quite quick to find the address and start directing you. It's okay. I've been using it this morning. Plus, you also get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well. So that's all right. But as you can see, there is literally no physical buttons apart from a little row of silver ones here. So in terms of adjusting climate and everything, it's all done from this screen. So if I go into it there, it brings it up here. So there's no controller, you've got to use it as a touch screen. It's all right, as I say, it's quick to respond, but you are having to use it, as I say, that touch screen. And as is my usual beef with a lot of these cars, is all the driver assistance systems default on. So if you want to, and if you're on that screen, you've got to swipe that one down, then go into another one. If I want to turn those off, I've got to go, let me remember where this is. If I go car, press brake pedal to switch the car on. Here we go, driver assistance, and they're all down there. And there is loads of them. Look at them all. There's loads of them. So driver monitoring system, rear cross traffic alert, rear collision warning, lane keep assist, emergency lane keeping, lane departure prevention, lane departure warning, intelligence avoidance system, intelligent speed control, HMA, speed limit assist. There's just huge amounts. And to go in and do all this while you're driving, because let's be honest, you forget to do it before you move off, don't you? You get in the car, you set off and you go, oh, I need to turn that off. So again, it's that, the people, manufacturers need to really think about this. I get that everyone, it's the law and they're having to put them on cars, but most of us want to switch them off. And there is quite a lot to go through to switch them off. It's not just Omoda. I'm not having to go to Omoda, but it is my beef. But as I say, there is just so many of them, they're all there. It'd be great if you could set it up to have a profile, or something, or like Renault have that button where you set it up how you want it, and you get in, you press one button, poof, all off, or whatever. But anyway, that's my only real beef there. There's a lot of things to look at when you're driving. If you want to change things. One thing that is quite impressive with them is they've got, they're quite seemingly, we had a little presentation this morning on the car. They're very quick to respond to things in terms of over-the-air updates. They were saying, that, there was a guy, one of the engineers was saying, could we have this on this? And he said, we thought we'd probably wait until the next, a facelift version of the car. But they came in to the next day and there was already an over-the-air update for it. So he said they are pretty good at getting things like that out there. So there is hope for it. And what I will say again is the actual design of the interior I really like. Whilst there is a lack of physical buttons, the materials they've used in the design, not so much from the sustainability point of view, of which there's no talk of, but the materials they've actually used feel nice. Instead of the piano black, it's got this almost dark glossed wood. This is sort of dark maple wood across the top here, which is really nice. It looks very premium, and it feels more premium in here than, say, a BYD Atto 3, or dare I suggest the MG ZS. Now, I've not driven the new ZS yet, it's coming, but it does feel a bit more premium than those two cars in terms of the design and some of the materials that's been used. So I have to commend them for that. The driver's screen is worth mentioning because, again, at first glance you think, gosh, again, there's an awful lot of information in there. But you can change it because, for instance, if you want the navigation map just in there, if I press and hold this button here, it just throws the nav map into there, and then you get your speed readout, which originally was slightly obscured by the wheel. It moves it down. So that's a really nice setup. So you've got your navigation right in front of you, a speed readout, and then just your state of charge on the bottom. So you can configure that quite nicely, I think, to how, to be more minimal. So you can keep your media there, say your Apple CarPlay or whatever, or your radio station there, and through your nav there, and it just starts to take stuff off it and just puts it very minimal at the bottom, where you can really, I'll start again, where you can read it really easily. So I do like that. That is good. There's some touch buttons down the side of it here, for lights and so forth, and for adjusting the volume. And I'm also wondering, because this has got the loudest indicator that I've ever, heard in the car. Can that adjust the volume of it? Yeah, it does. Oh, thank God for that. It was at full volume. That's good. I'm pleased about that. The indicators obviously on this stock here and the wipers, they're all grouped on the one stock because this other one over here is your transmission lever. So push in for P, up for reverse, neutral drive, a bit Mercedes-like in that sense. And again, like like the rest of it, it's nicely designed and actually feels quite quality. So that's good. The steering wheel, very simple design, 3-spoke design with a Omoda script across it. 2 big buttons on either side that completely move. So if you're turning volume down, the whole button moves. If you're changing the view on the screen, the whole button moves. But they're clearly defined and they're not touch sensitive. So again, cruise control over here, media, and up and down there, and say for changing the screen there, so that's okay. You've got a driver attention warning system, which is a bit overzealous, and that's mounted there. Again, I was doing stuff in the screen and it keeps coming up telling me I'm not paying attention. Well, don't put stuff in a screen then if you want me to look at this. Look dead ahead. There's some nice little group of buttons down by my right knee which do things like the lights and the opening up the charging flap there, and then again the sort of silverized buttons, very Mercedes-like actually, on the door for your 4 electric windows and your mirror controls on there. Nice design. Speakers up here as well. Now if you move up from this comfort model to the noble model, they've got a more premium audio system that's done by Sony, and I'm told it's very good. I don't know, I've just been listening to Radio 2 this morning. Other radio stations are available. And again, the dashboard, as I say, when you touch it, you've got this nice padded leatherette material here, which has a nice bounce back to it, and on the top there, it's that kind of slightly squidgy rubber up here. So in fairness, there is actually the feel of the materials and the look of them all feel good. And as I say, I think it's better than you get with BYD and MG so far up till now. As I say, I haven't driven the new MG ZS yet, but as I say, I'll reserve judgment on that. I've got an HS coming next week, which I'll report back on. Storage is good. You've got 2 cup holders here. There is a wireless charging pad in there, which also has vents in it. So it's a ventilated charger to keep your phone cooled, which is good. You've got a little flip up the bin here, which is nice, and it's lined at the bottom. So that's nice. You've also got your center armrest here, which I can get my whole arm in, and it's rubber lined on the bottom, which is nice. The door bins, however, aren't lined, and they're quite sharp on the plastic. There's only 2 areas I've found where the materials aren't quite as premium as they maybe could be, and that's the door bin edges, which are quite sharp, and the steering column shroud on the bottom. It's that shiny, it's quite shiny plastic, cheap feeling plastic, but you're not touching those bits that often, so you're not going to, I would forgive it for that. And also there's storage underneath this central spine as well. So there's a rubber mat at the bottom. Sorry, there's a lady just getting a dog out of the car there. That's why you can hear a dog barking. There's a rubber mat at the bottom there to stop things sliding around. The seats are okay, in the sense that they hold you in place while you're driving. The driving position itself is very much dead ahead, so you're not sitting off centre in the car or anything. However, there is a relative lack of adjustment. They'll adjust for height but not for tilt, and they feel quite soft. Now again, depending on the trim level, this comfort model has this sort of half cloth, half leatherette. You go up to the noble, it's synthetic leather you get, but there's no adjustment on the squab, and they feel quite soft. I don't know if I'd want to do an awful long journey in the car in terms of the support that you get. There's a relative lack of lateral support. You do tend to find yourself rolling around in the seat, and again the same down the sides of your thighs. There's not a huge amount of support there, and I don't think in terms of the cushioning the seats could do with being a bit firmer, because I think these are going to sag over time and not be that great. The other thing I will say is I am quite short, as you know. I'm not a particularly tall guy, so but I can feel my left knee, just against that column when I'm on the footrest there, against the centre tunnel. So I would think if you're taller and you've got longer legs than me, which isn't going to be hard, I think you're probably going to find this quite a tight little driving environment. They're quite close to that door here, and it's tight there. As I say, I'm okay with it, but I am very much aware of how tight it is close to me. So just make sure, again, if you're going to the dealership to have a test drive in it, take it for a long drive and just make sure you're comfortable with that. You know, to say, because that does feel quite tight. So, reasonable amount of equipment on the car. That comes on the car, even as standard. You know, as I say, wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, the twin screens, the wireless charging that's ventilated, that type of thing. But then let down by other things, I say, like the lack of adjustment on the seats, which could do with better. The seats themselves, I think, could do with being a little bit better personally. But I do like the design of it, and I do like the materials they've used on it. And I say this, it does feel more quality than some of the Chinese contemporaries that we've seen come into the UK over the last couple of years. So again, it's quite middle of the road in terms of what the Europeans are doing it better. People at Kia and Hyundai are doing it better as well. But as I say, I do think it's a better interior than, say, you get with the BYD Atto 3. So it's somewhere in the middle ground. Right, let's talk about batteries now. See, there's your little flap coming up. 61 kilowatt hour battery that the car has, but interestingly enough, that's its gross capacity, but its net capacity, believe it or not, is 60 kilowatt hours. They say only 1% of the battery, sorry, 1 kilowatt hour of the battery is used for battery management. The rest of it is usable, which I think is quite impressive. Now, Omoda quote 257 miles according to WLTP cycle, and they are suggesting they're being quite conservative with that in terms of what the car may be capable of. And in fairness to them, you know, whilst I haven't driven it a huge distance this morning, the amount that the percentage it's dropped, but the amount of range it's still giving me, I think is quite impressive. So that could be a real standout feature in terms of its efficiency. So we'll watch this space on that. However, charging speeds, well, they're a bit disappointing. They're only 80 kilowatts in fairness, and they only quote a 30 to 80% charge. Now, I know most people don't let the battery get down way too low, but 30 to 80% they're saying takes 28 minutes. So if we were to benchmark the other cars, which is the usual 10 to 80%, you're probably going to be closer to 40 minutes, which is a bit disappointing, I think. The other thing as well is they don't quote a completely flat to full charge time on a 7 kilowatt charger, but if we were to suggest you might be looking at between 10 and 11 hours. I think we'd probably be in with a shout, so that's fairly average as well in terms of that. But there's no mention of things like vehicle to load or vehicle to grid with the car, which again, given sort of like cars that are coming and giving sort of like, you know, sort of like cars that, you know, from manufacturers who have been really championing EVs, such as you know, Renault, Kia, for instance, with the new EV3. I'm a bit disappointed that a brand Omoda that's trying to break into this market isn't being a little bit more vocal about sort of like clever tech. But yeah, that's what you're looking at. So what we have here is a single motor producing 204 horsepower and an 0 to 62 time of 7.2 seconds, which is absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. You don't need any more than that in this style of car, and in fairness, the car feels sprightly enough out on the road, so there's no problem at all with the power that the car delivers. None at all. And in fairness, the way the car drives, again, is perfectly acceptable. It's very middle of the road. This is a very middle of the road style of car. I'm not actually driving in the middle of the road, you understand, but what I'm saying is there's nothing really outstanding about it, but there's nothing really wrong with it. And that just sums the whole experience of the E5 up for me. What you have is a car that feels perfectly pleasant enough to drive. It's, you know, okay on the road, it positions itself well. The steering's light without being sort of like overtly light, like the BYD Seal, or admittedly that's a hybrid, but I've driven the BYD Seal UDMI, and that's got a very light steering. This has got a little bit more weight behind it, but you're not going to be seeking out any apexes when you come up to some nice corners, let's just put it like that. The suspension. Let me just talk a little bit about the suspension, because it's a bit of a game of two halves with the suspension. It's set up to be a little bit soft, which means there's a lot of body movement in the car, and there's also a lot of noise transmits from the road. I like this particular section of road to test cars on because there's a lot of potholes and ridges across it and bumps and things, and it's a good road for telling me whether or not a car at low speed you know, has a suspension setup that's going to be able to cope with the travesty that is the UK's road network at the moment. And this is erring on the side of a little bit bad, if I'm honest. Again, it's that middle of the road, but it's just slightly off centre to the bad section, if that makes sense. You can feel a lot. It's not uncomfortable. There's no big jarring sensations coming through the car, but you can hear what's happening and you can feel a little bit of it as well. Now, this I think is quite interesting because Omoda have an R&D centre just outside Frankfurt. And what they're at great pains to point out is they're engineering their cars to sort of like suit European standards, to suit European roads and UK roads. I'm not sure any of their engineers have driven on the UK roads. It's not round Surrey anyway, because it's all right, but it's not really anything I'd try on. See these potholes here, you can really hear them come through the car. You're not getting a jolt through the seat, that's what I want to make clear, but they're not isolated from you. If they're not isolated from you as a driver, they certainly won't be isolated from you as a passenger either. So there you go. What I do like, however, is the weight of the controls. Now, as I said, it's not a particularly fast car, it's an acceptable car in terms of that. But what is nice is the throttle pedal has got a really nice weight behind it. So if I pull out, as if I was going to overtake something along this road and put my foot down, it feels quite like a combustion engine car's accelerator. It doesn't immediately just go bang, you know, this switch. You've got a nice weight and it progressively accelerates in a really nice and controlled manner. I really like that. That is something I do like. And this is just in the normal mode. There are 3 modes, as you'd obviously expect. There's Eco, Normal and Sport. Eco dulls everything off, Sport sharpens everything up. Personally, the Sport I don't think is really worth bothering with. I think where it drives really well is in the normal mode. And as I say, I like the weight behind the controls when it's in that normal mode. It's got a really nice feel to the accelerator pedal in it. It's just nice. It's just nice the way it picks up speed. That I do like. That is very pleasant indeed.
Congestion ahead.
Oh, is there? Well, not that I can see, love. And you can see there's a lot of, or you can hear there's a lot of driver aids on the car as well. So, which again, as I say, you've got to turn them all off. You've got to go in this screen. If you don't do it when you first set off, while you're driving, it's not the easiest thing to do. And when you're flicking through it, this thing comes up and tells you that you're not paying attention. Anyway, it's got 5 stars for the Euro NCAP in terms of safety, but a lot of that has got to do with having those safety systems fitted. So I'm not a big believer in taking Euro NCAP as saying that a car is intrinsically safe to drive. In terms of if you have the accident, it's maybe there to avoid you having it in the first place, but if you have it, who knows. Right, so that's the accelerator pedal. That's the other thing with the suspension is, because it's a little bit softer in its setup, it does tend to roll in the corners a little bit more. So as you go into a bend, you've got a lot of body movement in the car. And if I pitch into this roundabout and flick it round, oh yeah, there's a bit of lean there. In fact, everything just shot across the back of the car. But you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of body movement here. It's not that well controlled underneath. It's not uncomfortable, it's just it needs better control, and that's what makes me think they've missed a trick here. Now, not everyone's obviously going to be driving, you know, like their hair's on fire, but you know, you go into a corner a little bit too fast at times, or you are in a bit of a hurry, it all starts to feel a little bit loosey-goosey and a little bit untidy, is my point. Right, okay, that's that. The brakes are all right. There is a form of brake regen, but I've yet to find it. It isn't easy to find. I'm not sure where it actually is. I have a feeling it's in that screen. Oh, sorry, let me just, thank you very much. Which I don't really want to go and find out when I'm driving. But again, why has it not got little paddles behind the wheel to make it easy to have it on and off? Or at least a B button on the transmission lever, like some cars have. It's not there. So it's buried in there somewhere, and I don't know if it's easy to get to or not. And I find that really disappointing. And again, you know, they're talking about, oh, it's a Euro NCAP 5-star car, but if you're distracting a driver by putting a load of things in a touchscreen, is it that safe? So, middle of the road in terms of the way the car drives. In terms of comfort, again, it's okay, but the seat is the main bugbear with it. It's okay, you know, it's comfortable enough. You know, as I've been driving the car a few hours this morning, you know, and I don't feel sort of like achy or stuff, but I don't know if I'd want to drive it to Scotland or not, because I don't think there's enough support in the seat. You know, there's no lumbar support in it. There's height, but there's no tilt. You know, and again, you know, whilst you can adjust the steering column obviously for reach and rake, and that, like you can in most cars, that's all right. You find a reasonable driving position, but it's not, you know, it's not outstanding. And as I say, because you've got that upper body roll when you're in corners, you tend to find yourself moving around in the seat more than you really should. What you actually end up doing is hanging onto the steering wheel a little bit more. So you're holding onto the steering wheel to support you rather than let the seat do it, which is a bit disappointing. There's blind spot monitoring along with the driver aids and things like that, but it's just the little flashy lights and the mirrors that you get. Again, you know, for all the shouting about technology and the rest of it, there's no cameras down the side of the car that you would get in, say, a Hyundai Kona, you know, or some of the Kias. Again, you know, there's nothing really, and this is my whole point with the car. There's nothing really missing with it in terms of, you know, what other cars offer you around the business. But considering they're a new brand, would you not have expected them to come in really aggressively going, hey, look at everything that's fitted as standard, look at this, and look at what it can, or look at what the car's capable of doing? There's none of that. It's just average. And as I say, some people will be fine with an average car, but you're talking about £34,000, which is not average money. You know, that's a lot of money for people to spend on a family car. And I do think other people, brands that we know and brands that we've been used to, do it better. That's my point. The last thing I want to just talk about is when I was talking about the styling, I was saying that black bit at the back looked like another window. It's not. And that's a real blind spot. That's a thick rear C-pillar that you've got in the car. So if you're coming out of a tight junction and you look that over the shoulder, you've got a real blind spot back there. And again, that's my point. With not having cameras down the side of the car, you can't get past that. That's it. That's how it is. You're looking over your shoulder and all you're faced with is this darkness of a pillar. So as I say, that's it. That's my summary of the drive of this, you know, Omoda E5. It's fine. It should be a lot better than fine though. It needs to be a lot better than fine. Now, Omoda say that what they're offering is a C sector size of car at B sector prices. Yes and no. It starts at £33,055 for the comfort model, which this one is. If you want the higher spec Noble, which I still can't go with the name of, it's £34,500. And that gets you things like the Sony audio system, the heated seats front and rear, you know, better specification, that type of thing. And I don't think it's outstanding. I don't think it's an inexpensive car at that, because you're not far off the starting price of the Renault Scenic E-Tech at that, which in my opinion is a nicer car to drive from a more established manufacturer that has more space inside it, and is just, you know, it's a better car to drive. And if you look at something like the Kia EV3, although it's a B sector car, it's got a bigger boot and it's got, you know, a battery, you've got a choice of short range and long range, you know, you've got Volvo EX30, the Smart #1, Smart. We'll talk about the competition in a second, but my point is, it's not the sort of like, you know, it's not 29,995, is it? You know, the petrol car is £25,000 starting price, but the electric one is, say, that sort of like, you know, creeping into sort of like closer to that mid-30s. It's all right. It's sort of, again, it's middle ground, but it's not exactly clawing you in, is it? You know, with a real headline grabbing price figure. That being said, however, you do get a 7-year warranty with the car, 7-year 100,000 mile warranty with the car, which is good. You know, they're trying to show a little bit of commitment and a little bit of staying power with that. And the other thing that you might be worried about in terms of is dealerships. Well, at the moment they've got 60 dealer partners around the UK. They're not going to go as a direct sales sort of like outlet type of way. They're using dealer partners, which I think is the right way, because you want to build a relationship with your local dealer, obviously, if you do need to use them. And they've got 60 at the moment. They were hoping to have a bit more. They were looking for closer to about 100 dealers by the end of 2024. They're getting close to it. They say they're going to have 100 sort of like by the first quarter next year, and the total by the end of 2025 there'll be over 120 dealerships across the UK, and again from recognisable people. They're using DHL in terms of using the parts supply as well, so you've got again that confidence of a sort of like an overnight parts delivery if the car is in the dealership for something. So there is a bit of confidence there with that, but as I say, there's nothing really outstanding that's grabbing me and drawing me into it like a real headline grabbing price. It does seem a very much middle of the road style of car, doesn't it? Now, I jumped the gun a little bit there in that last section because I started talking about cars that it competes with. So let's just refresh ourselves on cars that you may consider rather than an Omoda E5. Well, as I say, I think you're going to be looking at things such as the Renault Scenic E-Tech, MG ZS. Now, the MG ZS is going through a change. The new electric one hasn't come out yet, but the new petrol engine one has, and the hybrid, and it is getting an awful lot of good press. And of course, MG is quite a recognisable brand, despite the fact it's been owned by the Chinese. It doesn't seem to matter. People recognise MG, people like MG, and they have been a fast-selling brand, certainly across Europe since they came back with their new range of models. And we know how good their electric stuff is. So that's a real, I think, thorn in Omoda's side is MG, because they're already there and established. BYD, okay, they were quite new to the UK last year, and again, the Atto 3, not exactly an outstanding car, but it's got a year's advance on this one as well, and they're very well equipped to standard, the Atto 3s. And of course, BYD have got huge confidence in terms of their battery technology as well. As I say, Renault Scenic E-Tech, recognisable brand, probably one of the best family cars I think that's out there. The Kia e-Niro, again, similar size of car, and a brilliant car. I love the Kia Niro. So it's a superb vehicle. And of course, with Kia, sticking with Kia, you've of course got the new EV3, and although it's a B segment car in terms of its interior space and its boot space, plus the option of short and long range batteries, that's a car you're going to have to consider as well. And they're talking about price of that car being very, very competitive. Now, I'm going to be driving that car in a couple of weeks' time, so it'll be interesting to see what I make of that, you know, in comparison with what else is out there. And of course, there are things such as the Volvo EX30, not as big, smaller car, but much more entertaining as a driver's car. And if you're considering the EX30, then you've got to obviously consider the #1 and the #3. And again, the smarts tend to be very focused on price and giving a lot of value for the money. So as I say, it's not really sort of like standing out in any particular area, this Omoda, considering what else you can buy for similar money that's already out there. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the new Omoda E5. Well, we like the interior design and use of materials. It has good performance and a decent range and efficiency. There's a confidence-inspiring warranty for being such a new brand. And there's lots of driver assistance systems and technology included for the price. We don't like, well, the styling's a bit generic and forgettable. The interior space feels a little bit cramped, especially for taller drivers. There's the lack of practicality with a small boot. And in our opinion, whilst they're focusing on price, there are better cars out there for not an awful lot more money. It's never going to be easy for a new brand to break into this market space against established competition, unless they've got something really, really special to shout about. Now, MG, take them for instance. Whilst they were newly reintroduced into the UK and Europe a few years back under new ownership, at least they had the heritage and the legacy of the MG brand and the badge to fall back upon. And of course, what they did was quite clever. They gave us some new product at some very cost competitive pricing. BYD, well, they've got their Blade battery technology to really shout about, and in fairness to them, they've given us some real standout products since they've come into the UK. The BYD Seal, the sports saloon, it goes up against the Tesla Model 3 and the Polestar 2, is one of exceptional note. I think, however, Omoda is going to have a harder hill to climb with this car, in fairness. Whilst, now don't get me wrong, it is a perfectly acceptable car, in the same way that it is perfectly acceptable to paint the walls of your house in magnolia paint. It's just not very original and not very sort of like stand out. That's its issue. The brand's sort of like focusing quite hard on its price and sort of like saying it offers a C-sector size car for B-sector money. But that's fine with the combustion engine car, but with the electric one, the E5, I don't think it is, because when you look at it, at around about £34,000, you're almost the cost of a new Renault Scenic E-Tech, which in my book is a much better car than this. You're also getting competition from Kia with the Niro, and of course the new EV3, which although it's a B-sector SUV, offers more space inside, just as much range, and dare I suggest much more interesting styling from a brand like Kia that we know is very, very good at its electric cars. So whilst, as I say, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with this car, there isn't anything really right with it to make me stand here and say that it's really worthy of your attention. In other words, it really is just here to make up the numbers. Thank you for watching another road test review on AutoEV. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Then once you've done that, make sure you've pressed the little bell button that's down below, because that's the way you get notified when our next video is uploaded and it's gone live. If you have enjoyed this week's review, then make sure you give it a little thumbs up, and of course don't forget, leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Does this tickle your pickle? Is this a car that you're interested in? Would you buy this over, say, a Renault Scenic or the Kia EV3 or a Volvo EX30 or a Smart? The Smart #1 and #3, very cost competitive cars, those two. Would you choose this over them? Let me know why. Do you think this isn't really even registered on your radar? Again, let me know why in the comment section down below. Now remember, we're also across all social media platforms as well, so Facebook, X, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, so please give us a follow there as well, because that does help the channel. And if you're in the marketplace for an electric car, might not be a new one, might not be a new Omoda E5, you might be thinking, what else is there out there in the used market, and how am I going to find out all the information that I need to know about it before I go and sign on the dotted line? Well, what you need to do is stay on the AutoEV YouTube channel, because at the top there's a little search bar, and if you type in the name of the car you're interested in, it will bring up our review on that car if it's been a new electric car launched in the UK in the last 4 or 5 years. And remember, it's the AutoEV road test review that car buyers trust when it comes to choosing their next electric vehicle. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching. Thank you for continuing to support us as a channel. I'll see you again soon.